Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we are going to do a movie review for the new Nicolas Cage film, Willy's Wonderland. Um, Now, this movie, I remember I actually did a trailer breakdown for this. At least I think I did. I know I definitely watched the trailer. And it looked hilarious to me. Like, it looks ridiculously hilarious. And I think some of that obviously has to do with Nicolas Cage, because anytime you have Nicolas Cage in a film, usually you're going to get something funny out of it, unless it's something like morbidly depressing, like Leaving Las Vegas. Um, or but at least nowadays, you're going to get something incredibly entertaining out of him, regardless of context. And I'd say the level of Nick Cage violence in this movie is similar to Mandy, although it's not quite as graphic as that. But I'll get into that a little later. But I usually like to break these things down in pieces. So first off, and it's the most important thing, is the story for this movie. The story for this movie is incredibly simple, and I'm not going to give away too many elements of it. I will say that if you played Five Nights at Freddy's, you probably know roughly what the story of this is. But basically, Nick Cage is this drifter who winds up getting into this town, and through a series of events, he winds up having to clean up this little, like, Chuck E. Cheese rip-off place in the middle of town. And that's really the majority of the story. There's a bunch of stuff surrounding the rip-off Chuck E. Cheese, which they call, Willy's Wonderland, hence the title of the movie. And Willy himself is Willy the Weasel, who, actually, and I'm not even going to get into that part because that's even funnier. So I'm not even going to get into that. But the thing is that outside of Nicolas Cage's own little, because it's kind of almost like two movies. You have a very clear A plot and B plot. The A plot is Nick Cage, and then the B plot is basically like all these town kids, and there's a bunch of conspiracy with the town, and you find out a bunch of things. And basically that's the B plot. But the beauty of the whole thing is that you understand at the end of the movie every single thing and why it is that way. And you almost never see that in movies these days. They usually leave like a plot thread like dangling at some point. There's not. This movie is wrapped up into a nice, neat little bow, and I like it because it's simple. It knows what it wants to do, and it does it very, very well. Now, moving on from the overall story of it to the acting itself, to the actors and how they play in the film. Nick Cage does a great job. Um, he is our stoic protagonist, and he is awesome in that role. Most of the comedy from the movie comes from him. There are some ridiculous things that he does in this movie that you don't really understand why he's bothering to do them, other than the fact that he just was told to do them that way. I'm not going to give that away either because that's really funny. But if you watch the movie, you'll understand what I mean. And then you have all the supporting characters. Now, the supporting cast in this movie actually does a pretty decent job. There are a few ones that stand out more than others. Nicolas Cage's co-star, I guess she would be the next top actress, Emily Tosta, and I apologize if I pronounced that completely wrong. But Emily Tosta, basically, she's kind of she's kind of the driving force behind the B plot. She's our secondary protagonist, essentially. And when we follow her, eventually her story meets up with Nick Cage's. And again, through her, we're able to understand why certain things are the way they are in this town and in this little Chuck E. Cheese ripoff place called Willy's Wonderland. So I thought she did a relatively good job at doing that. Her motivations make sense. All of the motivations in this movie make sense. Even the shallow ones, it still makes sense. The only motivations that don't necessarily make sense are horror movie logic motivations. And there's a couple of scenes, probably about two-thirds of the way through the movie, that are just like, if when compared to most of the rest of the movie, it's like, oh, some people are making pretty, obvious and common sense decisions, other than Nicolas Cage, who just, is doing his thing. But then it goes to a situation where, like, all right, horror movie logic has completely kicked in, and that's all we're going to see from this point on. And it is kind of like that, but I've watched so many horror movies that it doesn't really affect me at all at this point. I'm just kind of waiting for it to happen. But if that's something that bugs you, I could definitely see that irking some people in terms of maintaining their immersion into the story. I get that. Although they do pad the scenes with tits. Unfortunately, not actual, full frontal nudity. I guess there were too many nudity contracts in this movie. But the point is that at least the scenes, even though some of them don't necessarily make sense, they're at least entertaining. Except for there is one scene at the very end of this film that doesn't make any sense, and it's a Chekhov's gun, because you see it if you watch the movie and you pay attention, you see it coming. I think I actually called it when I watched it, because I watched it with Wep and Sham. I think I actually called it where I literally said that's going to be a Chekhov's gun. And they do that, and it doesn't really work at the end of the movie. Like, I understand why they did it. It's to wrap up the loose end, and kind of finish things off. But it doesn't really make sense, like, why it happens the way it happens. And the effects near the end of the movie are not as good as the effects in the beginning and the middle of the movie. I think that the problem is that, although there are a couple scenes where it's okay, but I think that they blew a lot of their budget on the animatronics, but I think that they needed to, in order to make this movie as good as it is. Well, I shouldn't say animatronics, because they're not actually animatronics, but for the most part, I would assume they're not. But they're actually, people in costumes probably. But they spent a lot on the aesthetic and transforming this place and doing all this stuff. And this had a lot of lower budgeted production companies, by the way. This movie was, even though it's officially put out by Screen Media Films, which is a company I've never heard of, there are about 7 different production companies that were involved in this thing. So it has a large constituency of companies that funneled money into this thing to get it made. So it does show in a lot of the early effects, though. A lot of the early effects are really, really good. It's just a couple very small incidents at the end of the movie that really kind of meh for the effects. But, moving on from effects, now we've done acting, we've done story structure, we've done the effects in the film, and now, just to kind of round that off, the directing of the film, the actual cinematography and how that looks. And I gotta say, it actually looks really, really good. I like the color schemes that they go with on a lot of the scenes. The stuff on the memorabilia and stuff, like the shirt that Nick Cage wears and stuff like that, the employee shirt, is goofy, and it does remind you a bit of like a Chuck E. Cheese type thing. It is kind of amusing, and then also too just the way that they film all of the kill scenes and stuff like that, because even though I said it wasn't as gory as Mandy, I did not say it was not gory at all, because it is fairly gory at points, although I don't necessarily count robots as gore. But it just kind of, the way that they film those fight scenes are just, it's very brutal. It's very, like, animalistic almost. Nick Cage just kind of turns into like a rabid animal for like 30, 40 seconds and just starts murking these things, and it is hilarious to watch, because it's just like the idea of you flipping that on its head is amusing to me in and of itself. The idea that you can take the premise of there's evil animatronics and they're there to murder you, and turn that around to the dude who's trying to be murdered could not give less of a fuck and murders them back. And that's also the other thing too, is like, whenever you see, there's 2 different times in this movie where you actually see Nicolas Cage's face change from like a stone cold, just dead stare, to actual emotion. And one of them is when he's killing animatronics, because he starts smiling like a maniac. And the other one is when he's playing pinball, because there is actually this very, very nice custom-made pinball machine in this Willy's Wonderland pinball machine that he gets like addicted to, and that's kind of funny to me. Is that those are really the only 2 scenes where he shows like actual emotion. And also, for some reason, and I don't understand why, the music department, you guys fucked up. How did you not get Pinball Wizard for that scene? And then, no more than a minute later, you have Freebird in there. You bought free. I guess. I mean, I guess they had to pick one. I guess they had to pick one. Either we get Freebird or we get Pinball Wizard, and they chose Freebird. So I can get that. Freebird goes with a lot of scenes. You know, you can look at Kingsman or Forrest Gump. Um, but you know, actually going down to the music too. The music in this is actually really good too, and the sound editing and stuff like that. It's actually very very good sound editing, especially when it comes to trying to mesh up the actions of the actual animatronics and the voices that are over them. Because obviously, since a lot of those guys are in full body suits, you know they have to have their audio recorded separately because it just wouldn't work unless they have some kind of a sensitive microphone inside that suit. But I figured that would echo. But yeah, the sounds and the voiceover work are all really, really good. Like I said, Nick Cage doesn't really say anything in the film, but you know he doesn't really need to say anything, like I've explained before. But like I said, I really liked Willy's Wonderland. I thought this was kind of a refreshing comedic thing from Nick Cage. I've been liking a lot of Nick Cage's work as of late. You know, we had I've talked before about Mandy and Color Out of Space, and I like both of those movies, and I think he does a really good job in those. And I'd put this alongside those as a really, really amusing role for him. Um, Again, takes great advantage of like Nicolas Cage's ability to just become whatever he has to become. You know, to be this like completely like stone faced character, um, and then just turn on a dime into like a murderous like rampaging psycho. But you know. That's just kind of my opinions on this movie. If I were to give it a rating, I'd probably give it 4 out of 5 stars. I really did enjoy it. It doesn't have that many issues wrong with it outside of the little effects things at the end. And the story is solid and it's explained. You know, I love that when you get that nowadays, especially with a movie, is the story actually gets explained. You don't leave a shit ton of loose ends because they're trying to sequel bait you. But like I said, I want to know what you guys think. Have you seen Willy's Wonderland? Have you not? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Put your thoughts in the comments below. As usual, I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications. Hit the like button. Subscribe. And remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?